I never thought my 30th birthday would feel like the moment the world decided to unravel itself in slow motion. The sun had barely crested over the rolling hills outside our village, spilling golden light across the quiet streets, when the bell above the door tinkled and a stranger stepped into the little restaurant where I was sitting with my parents. His coat was heavy, dark, and somehow out of place in the early spring warmth. He moved with an ease that made my skin prickle. A stranger who seemed both harmless and terrifying at once. I remember the way my parents froze. Sarah's hand tightened around her coffee cup as if she could anchor herself to the ordinary, to the mundane, while David's jaw clenched with a subtle tremor that I now recognize as fear masking something much deeper. The man handed me an envelope, thick, off-white, with no markings except for a single word scrawled across the front in looping handwriting I didn't recognize. For Leo. That's me, my name. Everything else in the room seemed to pause. Even the faint clinking of cutlery against porcelain, even the low murmur of the chef in the back, faded into silence. I could feel my pulse in my temples. What is this? I asked, my voice a brittle echo of calm I was trying desperately to summon. David snatched the envelope out of my hands before I could open it. He ripped it apart with a force that startled everyone. Paper tore with a crack that sounded like bones snapping. "Don't you dare touch that," he said, his voice low but tight, suffocating the air around us. Sarah looked at him, wide-eyed, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. Her lips quivered, but no words came out. The stranger just smiled. A quiet, almost gentle smile that made my stomach knot. "Your real mother is outside," he said. And then, without another word, he turned and left as silently as he had come, leaving behind a trail of questions that burned hotter than the morning sun. I don't remember walking outside. Or maybe I do, and I've chosen to break the memory into fragments so it doesn't overwhelm me. The parking lot was empty except for a solitary figure standing near the edge, framed by the shade of a sprawling oak tree. Her hair caught the sunlight in a way that made it look almost like molten copper. Tia Vatic. She was impossibly real, impossibly there. I felt my legs give way beneath me, though I was standing perfectly still. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. She didn't speak at first. She just looked at me, her eyes heavy with a mix of sorrow and relief. And then she said it, words that broke something inside me and rearranged it into shapes I hadn't known existed. "Leo, I've waited a long time to meet you." I froze, my mind spun. "Waited? Who are you? How do you know my name?" My voice cracked like dry wood. "I am your mother," she said. The simplicity of the statement was devastating. Just those 4 words, but they carried a weight so dense I could hardly breathe. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, the safety of the world I grew up in, shattered. I wanted to scream at my parents. I wanted to demand explanations. But David and Sarah looked as though they were made of glass, fragile, waiting to shatter. I could read the panic in their eyes, the stories they had carefully constructed for decades, the secrets they thought were buried so deep now rising to the surface like water through a crack in a dam. And then there were the neighbors. Mr. Harrison, with his ever-watchful gaze, and Mrs. Clow, always nosy in that small-town way that can be both benign and cruel. They were all there now, drawn to the chaos, drawn to the sense that something monumental was about to be revealed. I could feel their stares, their whispers grazing the edges of my awareness. What did they know? Had they suspected all along? Tia took a step closer. She didn't touch me, but the air between us felt like it was vibrating. "There are things you need to know about your past, Leo," she said. Her voice was calm, patient, and yet every word felt like a hammer against my ribs. Things about your birth, about the choices people made for you, decisions that were never yours to make. And that's when it hit me. All the little inconsistencies I had noticed over the years, the whispered arguments between my parents, the way David avoided certain questions about my childhood, the stories that never quite aligned with the truth. Everything. Every minor detail I had brushed aside, every fleeting suspicion I had buried deep, was converging into this impossible, terrifying, undeniable reality. I wanted answers, but I was terrified of what those answers might cost me. My sense of self, my understanding of love and family. Everything was suddenly negotiable. But I feel her presence as surely as I feel the weight of my own failures. Perhaps she is the catalyst we have all been waiting for. Or perhaps she is simply a shadow we mistake for reality. Only time and Caspian will reveal her role in this delicate, fragile universe we inhabit. In moments of solitude, I replay the encounters with the neighbors, the quiet observations, the casual greetings that hide 1,000 judgments. Mr. Finch, ever patient, always watching, offering subtle wisdom that I accept only when convenient. Mrs. Crane, radiant in her eccentricity, brilliant in her capacity to see what others overlook, offering me glimpses of truths I would rather avoid. They are the chorus to my life's drama, the narrators who exist on the margins, yet somehow dictate the tempo of our story. The walls of this house know me. They know my rage, my tenderness, my fears, my shame. They have heard the arguments, the laughter, the whispered confessions that I share with Isabel when the world sleeps. And they will continue to bear witness, long after I am gone, long after the mistakes of my youth and adulthood have faded into memory. But I will not leave without attempting to bridge the chasms I have carved so carelessly. I owe that to Caspian, to Isabel, to the legacy of the Wilder name. And so I speak now, not just to the walls, not just to the shadows, not just to myself, but to you, the silent observer. You who have stumbled upon our story, who may think you understand the weight of a father's love, of a husband's duty, of a man's failure. You are mistaken. Our story is not linear, neat, or simple. It is jagged, messy, and beautiful in its imperfection. If you wish to see what happens when regret meets redemption, when distance confronts intimacy, when silence is shattered by voices long unheard, then stay. Watch. Listen. Subscribe if you must, for the unfolding of the Wilder saga has only just begun. And I promise you, what you think you know is only the surface. The depths remain unexplored, and they are darker, more tender, and infinitely more human than you could imagine. Because that silence would heal wounds too deep to name. My backpack was heavy, but heavier still was the weight of all the things I had left behind. The house, the echoes of arguments, the sharpness in my father's voice, the quiet despair in my mother's eyes. I remembered the last night I spent in that house. Rain had been drumming against the windows, relentless, like a warning I refused to hear. Sebastian had sat in the study, head bowed, and for once, he said nothing. Silence was his weapon, his punishment, his shield. Isabel had hovered in the hallway, a ghost of herself, watching me pack. I wanted to stay, to fight for their approval, their love, but something in me had snapped. The suitcase felt lighter than my heart as I closed it, and yet the moment I stepped outside, the world seemed impossibly vast and mercilessly empty. And now, after all these years, I am back. Not fully, not yet. But the internet does not forget, and someone in that house, has finally noticed me again. 43 voicemails in 24 hours. Everyone a dagger, everyone a confession I am not sure I am ready to hear. My mother's voice, fractured by time and worry. My father's, rigid and measured, the way it always was, demanding control even in fear. And then the subtle threads connecting them both. Threads I once thought I had severed forever. I remember Googling my own name, almost on a dare, almost by accident. And there she was, Isabel, somehow present in every result, every article, every social trace I had left behind. The realization hit me like a train collision. They were looking for me. They had been all along. And the anger I had cultivated for years, the resentment, the sense of abandonment, it wavered, cracked, and something else stirred in its place. Violet Everly. The name had appeared in the whispers of online forums, in the margins of conversations I was never meant to overhear. Who was she? A stranger? A friend? A warning? I could not tell, but her presence seemed inextricably tied to the unfolding chaos, the unraveling of the lives I had tried to escape. There was a tension in the air, like static before a storm, and I felt it in my bones. The memories of my father and me, of arguments and misunderstandings, came back like shards of glass. The time I tried to explain myself and was met with silence, the time I reached for help and found only judgment. And yet, the pull to reconnect was irresistible. I am drawn to them, despite every instinct screaming to run, despite every scar reminding me why leaving had seemed necessary. I wonder if they have changed. My father, with his meticulous rules, his obsessive control over the small universe of our family. My mother, with her quiet strength, her love that had been patient enough to survive my absence. And I with my anger, my longing, my cautious hope, returning not as the boy they once knew, but as someone forged in absence and longing. The city passes outside the train window, a blur of lights and shadows, and I feel the past colliding with the present. Every decision I made, every step I took away from them, now demands reconciliation, understanding, or perhaps retribution. I do not know which is coming first. I only know that when I walk through that door, the house will never be the same again. And I am ready, as much as one can ever be, to confront it all. The street is quiet, but not silent. Not really. Every house has its own pulse, its own heartbeat, but the Wilder estate beats differently, irregularly, unpredictably, like a drum in a storm. I have lived here longer than most, seen more than anyone admits. I see patterns where others see chaos. I notice the slight stiffening of a shoulder, the faint tremor in a hand, the shadow of regret in a glance. And the Wilders, well, they are an entire symphony of tension, each note sharper than the last. Sebastian Wilder thinks he controls the rhythm of his household. I have watched him, observed him. A man convinced that rules, discipline, and measured gestures can contain a storm. And for a time, it worked. The walls held, the windows reflected calm. But storms do not care for walls, and they do not respect windows. They wait, patient, until the perfect moment to break through, and I have seen the first ripples of that break. Caspian, oh that boy, the child who left 7 years ago with nothing but a suitcase and a fragmented hope. I remember him, the small hands, the defiant eyes, the way he tested the boundaries of his father's authority. And I have watched the messages pile up. 43 voicemails, 24 hours, the sun returning, breaking the silence. It is both beautiful and terrifying to witness, for I know the family is unprepared as a storm-blind sailor tossed into a hurricane. Isabel Wilder has always been the quiet axis of the household, the one balancing the chaos Sebastian invites. She bears the weight with grace, though I know it consumes her. I have seen it, her shoulders curved under the invisible load, her eyes reflecting sorrow she cannot speak aloud. And now, as Caspian returns, I see the tension in her, the fragile anticipation, the fear of confrontation. She is the kind of woman who holds a house together, not by control, but by understanding the currents that flow beneath its surface. The house itself is alive. Its floors remember footsteps that have long vanished. Its walls remember laughter, arguments, confessions, even silence. I have walked past it hundreds of times, the air thick with invisible residue, a scent of fear, love, hope, and regret. Every neighbor has their assumptions. Most stay at a distance, content with their stories. But I see what they cannot. I have learned to watch without intervening, to witness without judgment. And yet, I know that something is stirring that even I cannot fully predict. Violet Everly. The name drifts through conversations I am only partially part of. I have glimpsed her in passing, noticed the subtle ways she shifts the balance of perception. Who she is, why she has appeared now, remains unclear. But her presence is undeniable, like a wind that arrives suddenly, carrying whispers of change, secrets, and revelation. I cannot yet see the full measure of her influence, but I feel it, like the tremor before an earthquake. There is a rhythm to observing. One must note the small things first. The hesitation in Sebastian's step, the tightness in Isabel's jaw, the twitch of Caspian's fingers as he anticipates confrontation. Then the medium things, the door left ajar too long, the way the curtains are drawn differently each day, the paintings Mrs. Crane leaves leaning in odd angles as if pointing to truths unseen. And finally, the large things, the events that cannot be ignored. The sudden ringing of phones, the voices raised in anger or despair, the inevitable clash of expectation and reality. I have learned patience in these streets. Patience with time, with seasons, with human folly. And I have learned that the Wilder family is a particularly complex specimen. Not simply because of wealth or position or the size of their house, but because they are bound by love and failure in equal measure. Every action, every omission, every silent betrayal carries the weight of history, and the consequences ripple outward to touch every life in the neighborhood, whether people notice or not. I remember a morning 7 years ago when Caspian left. It was raining. He did not look back, and Isabel and Sebastian did not follow him to the gate. I watched from my window across the street as the boy disappeared into the gray, carrying only the fragments of what they had given him, what they had failed to give. And I knew, even then, that absence would not be absence forever. The past does not remain buried when the stakes are high, when hearts are unresolved, when secrets demand revelation. The Wilders' lives are a slow-motion collision, a series of choices that accumulate weight until they cannot be ignored. I see it in Sebastian's rigid routines, in Isabel's careful calculations, in Caspian's growing recklessness, in the subtle intrusions of Violet Everly, and in the quiet scrutiny of Mrs. Penelope Crane, whose artistic observations capture more than she intends. Every element is connected, every gesture carries consequence, and I, as a neighbor who has seen too much, am both witness and participant in a story unfolding with relentless inevitability. And yet, the human heart surprises even those who think they understand it. Sebastian will stumble. Isabel will falter. Caspian will challenge. Violet will unsettle. The moments of tenderness, of reconciliation, of truth, these will appear in the cracks, in the silences, in the whispers between arguments. It is delicate, chaotic, terrifyingly real. And I, old and observant, can only watch, noting, recording, hoping that the eventual reckoning will not destroy them entirely. This is the life of a witness. Perpetual observation, acute perception, patient endurance. The Wilder family teaches you that every facade hides a fracture, every smile conceals a fracture line, every voice hides tremors of fear or longing. And as I sit by my window, notebook in hand, watching lights flicker in the house across the street, I am acutely aware that what is coming will alter everything. Not one wall will remain untouched. Not one heart will remain unmoved. I have seen storms. I have seen tempests. But even I am not prepared for the collision that waits in the hallways of that house. And yet, I will watch. I will record. I will bear witness. For in the stories of others, we often find the truths we cannot face in our own reflections. The smell of oil paint clings to my fingers like memory itself. The smell is stronger than it should be, thicker than the air in my little studio at the edge of the street. Sometimes I wonder if the smell is a warning, something that ties me to the Wilders, to their house, to the storm that brews behind closed doors. I have lived here long enough to know that some things are inevitable. The rhythm of seasons, the passing of light across the floors, the way the Wilder family fractures in ways that are both subtle and catastrophic. I see them from my window, yes, but I also see them in brushstrokes, in angles, in the distortion of light that falls upon the walls. Sebastian, rigid, measured, thinking control is enough. Isabel, graceful, quiet, the axis upon which the household spins, holding together what he would see crumble. Caspian, unpredictable, full of the fire and pain of absence, the weight of 7 years carried in his posture, and in the way his eyes avoid yet demand confrontation. And then Violet Everly. Oh, her presence, delicate yet piercing, like a tremor beneath the floorboards. I am not simply a neighbor. I am a witness, yes, but I am also a participant in a story I did not choose to be part of. Each painting I leave propped against the wall is a confession, a secret told in color and form. Sometimes I fear the Wilders will see too much, or worse, too little. But they cannot help themselves. They are in constant motion, their lives a combination of guilt, love, and fear, and I capture it all, layer upon layer, in every canvas I touch. Sebastian's obsession with perfection, with order, is fascinating. He believes that a rigid structure can contain chaos, but chaos is never contained. It only waits, patient, until a crack appears. And cracks appear in all families, in all lives, and the Wilder house is riddled with them. The paint I lay on canvas becomes a record. The tension between father and son. The silent judgments between husband and wife. The whispered confessions of absence. I do not need to speak to understand. The visual language is enough. Caspian's return has shifted everything. I sensed it the moment his name appeared in a local thread online, the trembling announcement that someone had finally found him again. 43 voicemails in 24 hours, each a plea, a reminder, a confrontation. He carries the absence of 7 years in his body like a secret he cannot release, and yet he is here, on the threshold, a storm about to crash into the household. I cannot know what will happen when he finally walks through the door, but I can feel it in the way shadows stretch across my walls, the way light fractures along the edges of my canvases. Violet Everly, she intrigues me more than any human has in decades. I see her glimpses, fleeting, almost ethereal. There is something about her that unsettles the house, that rattles the rigid structures Sebastian relies upon, that awakens Isabel's careful vigilance. And Caspian, he seems to orbit her presence, unaware yet drawn, like a planet caught in an invisible gravitational pull. Who she is, truly, I do not know. Perhaps no one does. Perhaps her role is not to be understood, but to reveal what must be confronted. I am old enough to recognize patterns. I have studied them in nature, in paint, in human behavior. And I know that the Wilders are entering a phase of reckoning. The walls that have contained their secrets will not hold forever. The truths that have been hidden in silence, in absence, in avoidance, they will spill. Sebastian's pride, Isabel's endurance, Caspian's anger, Violet's quiet disruption, they are the elements of a perfect storm. And I, with my brushes, my paints, my observation, am both chronicler and unwitting participant. There is a beauty in their chaos, a rawness that is almost unbearable. Families are rarely as simple as they appear, and the Wilders are no exception. I have watched from my studio for years, noticed the moments others miss. A hand pressed too long against a doorframe, a glance exchanged in silence, the way Sebastian's eyes flicker when he believes no one is watching. I translate these moments into color, into shape, into shadow and light. My canvases are the history no one admits exists. I do not envy Isabel, though I admire her. To hold a household together through love, patience, and quiet strength is no small feat. And yet, there is tension beneath her calm, a fear she does not voice, a careful monitoring of every small gesture, every half-spoken word. I see it all, and I know she senses it too. The shifting dynamics, the return of Caspian, the arrival of Violet, the potential collapse that waits just beyond each threshold. And then there is Sebastian, whose rigid control has always been his armor and his weakness. He believes the past can be corrected by discipline, by willpower, by appearances. But the past is not so easily tamed. Every absence, every argument, every silent retreat has built a pressure cooker within the walls of that house. And I, standing on the periphery with paint-stained fingers, can feel the pressure rising. I often wonder how it will end, or if it ever truly does. The Wilders are bound by love, by guilt, by pride, by mistakes. Threads so tightly wound that when one snaps, all are affected. And Violet Everly, she may be the spark, or she may be the lens that reveals the inevitable truths already waiting in shadow. Whatever happens, the energy in the house is undeniable. The rhythm is changing, and I, who have seen patterns before, know that no one inside that house is prepared for the crescendo. And yet there is hope, subtle, fragile, like light reflecting off a fractured surface. Sebastian may stumble, Isabel may falter, Caspian may rage. But these fractures also reveal beauty, vulnerability, truth. And I will watch, paint, and remember. For in the Wilders, I see the essence of life itself, imperfect, messy, heartbreaking, and luminous. If you think family is simple, that love can fix everything, that absence and silence are harmless, you are mistaken. The Wilders are a living proof that every choice, every word left unsaid, every glance avoided, ripples outward with consequences that will never be contained. And when the house finally shakes with confrontation, when secrets emerge like sunlight-piercing fog, only then will the truth be seen in its full, terrifying, exquisite form. I move like a shadow across spaces that are not mine. The rooms belong to others, yet I occupy them the way one occupies thought, silent, unnoticed, and yet unavoidable. The Wilder house hums with life that is both deliberate and chaotic, each heartbeat a signal, each breath a caution. I feel the vibrations beneath the floors, the tension in the walls, the weight of unspoken words hanging like cobwebs. There is Caspian, restless, furious, carrying absence like a backpack of stones. I see the tension in his eyes before he even knows he is seen. He walks into spaces expecting confrontation, yet he is drawn to me by threads he cannot name, threads I do not choose to untangle for him. His anger, his longing, his fragile hope, all of it pulses outward, mixing with the energy I bring, subtle, disruptive, impossible to ignore. Sebastian. A man of structure, of rules, of brittle certainty. He is predictable, yet every predictable man has a breaking point. I watch him fumble with authority, attempting to impose control over forces he does not understand. His voice is measured, his gestures are precise. But the cracks in his armor are audible, and I hear them. I do not need to speak to alter the rhythm of the house. My presence alone is enough. Isabel is different. She senses more than she admits. Patience, careful observation, The ability to sustain tension without breaking. It fascinates me. She is both anchor and bridge, holding together what Sebastian would see collapse. I see her watch me, though she pretends she does not, calculating, trying to measure the threat I represent, the change I bring. But I am not here to play by the rules of expectation. I am here because they are all too fragile, too wrapped in patterns that demand disruption. The house is a living thing. I feel it breathe. Each floorboard remembers footsteps that were not mine. Every echo, every whisper, every shadow belongs to someone else's history. And yet I move through it as though it recognizes me, though I am not part of its past. I am a prism, refracting tension, amplifying truth, breaking light into shards of exposure. They will feel me before they see me. They will understand me only in pieces, fragments scattered like glass across the rooms of their lives. Caspian's messages, the voicemails, the bursts of anger, the trembling vulnerability, they do not surprise me. I anticipated them. I move closer to him, silently, unseen, and yet I feel the pulse of his anticipation, the tremor of his return. He does not know the full weight of my presence, nor does he suspect that the timing of his re-entry into the house has been orchestrated, observed, guided. I am not cruel. I am necessary. Sebastian fears control slipping through his fingers, but control is an illusion, brittle as autumn ice. I see the hesitation in his hand when the phone rings, the subtle recoil in his step when a message arrives. He is unaware that I already know more than he imagines. He cannot anticipate, because anticipation is linear, and I am not linear. I am the disruption of expectation, the pause between heartbeat and thought, the shadow in the corner of perception that refuses to be labeled or contained. Isabel, for all her insight, cannot fully measure me. She senses, yes, she observes, yes, but her world is one of cause and effect, of responsibility and calculation. She is tethered by love, by history, by duty. I am untethered. I exist in the spaces between, in the gaps, in the uncertainty. And those gaps, they terrify her because they force recognition of fragility she cannot ignore. I move through the house with care, leaving nothing obvious. A brush of air across a curtain. A reflection in a mirror. The faint scent of lavender and earth that lingers long after I have passed. Every subtlety matters. Every unnoticed shift is a message, a ripple that travels outward, touching those who inhabit the space, altering their equilibrium. And yet, I am not the only disruption. Caspian himself, with his rage, his longing, his sudden return, is already breaking the fragile rhythms. The convergence is near. Father, mother, son, the echoes of absence, the ghosts of mistakes, all colliding in ways that cannot be predicted. And I am the lens through which this collision will be observed, the catalyst that forces revelation. Sebastian will confront shadows he does not understand. Isabel will be forced to reckon with truths she has long avoided. Caspian will face both past and future in the eyes of those who shaped him. And through it all, I remain, watching, moving, refracting, fragmenting reality so that nothing can remain unchanged. The walls will speak. Floors will remember. Windows will reflect not light, but consequence. I am here not to destroy, but to illuminate. To show the fractures that have always existed. To reveal the hidden tensions, the silent compromises, the love that is both suffocating and sustaining. There will be confrontation. There will be revelation. And when the air finally shifts, when voices rise and truths spill into the open, only then will the wielders understand the full measure of what has returned, what has arrived, what has always been hovering at the edges of their perception. Because I am not here by accident. I am not incidental. I am necessary. And the story, fragile and jagged as it is, will not be complete until I have moved through it fully, leaving behind clarity in the form of disruption, leaving behind understanding in the form of questions, leaving behind echoes of a presence that cannot be ignored. The house waits. They wait. I wait. And time, patient, relentless, begins its final unfolding. The house is alive tonight. Every creak of the floorboards, every draft curling through the hallways, every faint flicker of light carries meaning, carries warning. Sebastian stands at the doorway of the study, hands gripping the edge of the desk like it might anchor him against the storm he cannot see yet. He does not speak. He cannot. The weight of absence, the return of Caspian, the pressure of the past pressing forward, it renders him mute. I watch him from the stairwell, the shadowed angle of observation giving me perspective he cannot anticipate. Isabel is in the kitchen, poised yet trembling in subtle ways. Her hands hover above the countertop, as if preparing to create, to protect, or to strike. I know she senses the convergence, feels the collision of all forces in the house. She has lived long enough to predict rhythms, but tonight the rhythm is fractured, unpredictable, and every beat is a warning. Caspian's voice carries from the hall. It is not loud, but it is charged, trembling with years of absence and unspoken resentment. 43 voicemails condensed into one living presence. His eyes, once full of defiance and grief, now blaze with curiosity, accusation, and longing. He steps into the living room where Sebastian waits, and the air thickens as though the house itself is holding its breath. Violet Everly drifts through the rooms like smoke. Not seen, not touched, yet undeniably present. She moves with an awareness that unsettles, that shifts everything in subtle ways. The edges of vision catch her, the corners of perception bend toward her. She does not speak, yet her influence is felt in every glance, every tremor of the air, every tension line in Sebastian's jaw and Isabel's shoulders. She is the unseen axis, the pivot upon which tonight will turn. Mr. Atticus Finch watches from the window across the street, notebook open, pen hovering, chronicling every nuance. He has seen storms before, tempests of lesser intensity, but nothing like this. The convergence he predicts is more than familial reunion. It is an eruption of unspoken truths, layered grievances, and fragile hopes that have accumulated over years. He knows that every misstep, every withheld word, every sudden action will ripple outward, touching everyone present and echoing for years beyond tonight. Mrs. Penelope Crane has abandoned her brushes tonight, though her studio is nearby. Her eyes roam the Wilder house like a painter scanning a canvas, noting shadows, angles, tension, and imbalance. She can see the patterns forming, the colors of emotion bleeding into each other. Her perspective is detached, almost clinical, yet she feels the tremor of uncertainty vibrating through the walls. She knows the story she has painted in her mind will be rewritten tonight, in real time, by actions she cannot influence. The first collision occurs subtly, almost imperceptibly. A glance from Caspian toward Sebastian, charged with accusation. A flinch from Sebastian, untrained, instinctive. Isabel exhales, a slow, measured breath that carries the weight of anticipation and fear. Violet moves closer, her presence like a wind-stirring dust, shifting shadows across the hardwood floors. No one speaks yet, but the air is heavy with potential energy, poised on the edge of eruption. Caspian finally breaks the silence. You, both of you, do you even know what it feels like? 7 years. His words falter, choke on the weight of memory and longing. He steps forward, defiance tempered by uncertainty. Sebastian's hand trembles, catching the edge of the desk, knuckles whitening. Isabel moves toward him, not to block, not to shield, but to anchor, to steady the fragile line between confrontation and collapse. Violet watches from the periphery. She does not intervene, does not guide, yet her presence magnifies every emotion, every tension. Sebastian cannot measure her. Caspian cannot predict her. Isabel senses her indirectly, as one senses the shift in wind before a storm breaks. She is the catalyst for clarity, the mirror reflecting everything hidden. Outside, Mr. Finch scribbles furiously, knowing that every second is monumental. The lines between observer and participant blur. Mrs. Crane's eyes track the play of light and shadow across the house, noting the patterns that emerge when human behavior, long suppressed, finally erupts. A plate falls in the kitchen. Isabel startles, Sebastian flinches, Caspian's jaw tightens. The sound is small, but it cracks the silence like a lightning strike. Words follow words. Accusations tumble, confessions drip, suppressed grief floods the room. Violet moves closer, a quiet presence, letting the unfolding chaos reveal itself. Each truth, each memory, each regret surfaces in violent yet inevitable rhythm. Sebastian speaks, haltingly at first, voice raw. I never knew. His authority falters, replaced by vulnerability. Isabel counters softly, the anchor of reason and emotion entwined. Caspian reacts violently, then pauses, caught between anger and relief, between grief and recognition. Violet's presence magnifies each response, refracting tension into clarity. The room becomes a living organism, each heartbeat and breath interacting with another, the energy shifting constantly. Outside, Mr. Finch records, pen scraping paper like a heartbeat in time with the storm. Mrs. Crane trembles with excitement, unable to intervene, yet knowing that tonight, every brushstroke of human emotion is being rendered in raw, unfiltered reality. Hours pass like minutes. The family shifts, reorganizes, unravels, and then begins to rebuild in new patterns, unspoken but acknowledged. Sebastian's rigidity softens under the heat of confrontation. Isabel's patience becomes a shield and guide. Caspian's anger transforms into dialogue, tentative but growing. Violet remains the enigmatic fulcrum, the unseen force aligning truth and consequence. And then silence descends, not comfortable, but heavy with acknowledgement. Every member of the household has been seen, has been confronted, has faced shadows of themselves. The convergence is complete, though the consequences are ongoing. Every heartbeat, every memory, every secret has found its place in the chaotic mosaic of reality. Outside, the night deepens. Mr. Finch closes his notebook, the story chronicled yet continuing. Mrs. Crane exhales, exhaustive and exhilarated, having witnessed both beauty and rupture. The Wilder house rests, though it is not at peace. Tonight, everything changed. Tonight, all threads intersected. And tomorrow, the repercussions will continue to unfold, unstoppable, unpredictable, yet necessary. The air is thick with revelation, yet fragile hope remains. This is not an ending. It is the first moment of a new rhythm, a recalibration of bonds, a confrontation that was long overdue. And as Violet slips into shadow once more, I know the story is only beginning to reach its full clarity. The house is quiet now, but the silence is not empty. It is thick with echoes, with the weight of words finally spoken, confessions finally unburdened, truths finally surfaced. I watch the room from the landing, the dim glow of the chandelier casting fractured light across the floors. Every corner seems to hold a memory now, a tension released yet lingering, like smoke from a fire that has not fully burned out. Sebastian sits at the edge of the study chair, head in hands, not ashamed but exhausted, defeated by realization. His authority has been challenged, his control dissolved, yet in the collapse there is a strange liberation. He finally sees, not just his failings, but the impact they have had on those he loves. The rigidity that defined him for so long is softened by a fragile awareness, a painful clarity that is unfamiliar and unwelcomed, yet necessary. Isabel moves quietly among them, gathering plates, straightening papers, smoothing things that do not need smoothing, as though creating order can patch the invisible fractures of the night. But she is not the same woman who waited silently for Caspian 7 years ago. Something has shifted in her, subtle but undeniable. Patience remains, yes, but patience now carries the weight of vigilance tempered by understanding. She senses the change in Sebastian, the uncertainty in Caspian, the intangible presence of Violet Everly that still lingers like a scent in the hallways. Caspian, restless, paces the room. His anger has not vanished, it has transformed. The fire that once fueled resentment now sparks dialogue, questions, and tentative reconciliation. He tests his father with words, with subtle gestures, seeking evidence that Sebastian has truly seen him, that Isabel has truly heard him. Each glance, each pause, each carefully measured interaction ripples through the household like tiny earthquakes. He is no longer a boy, yet the vulnerability of absence, of lost years, remains etched in his movements. Violet Everly remains on the margins, a presence almost unreal. Her eyes are everywhere, yet she speaks nothing. She observes how the family fractures and reforms, how tension reshapes itself into fragile connections. She is the mirror, reflecting truths the Wilders cannot admit to themselves. Her role is complete, though unseen, and she fades into shadow, leaving the family to confront the reality of what has transpired without her interference, without explanation. Outside, Mr. Finch watches from the window across the street, pen poised but idle. He has chronicled every tremor of emotion, every rising and falling cadence of voice, every silent recognition of failure and potential. He sees the aftermath not as a resolution, but as a threshold, a moment when the trajectory of a family is altered forever. The patterns he observes are no longer lines. They are waves, unpredictable, shifting, alive with consequence. Mrs. Penelope Crane's hands hover over a fresh canvas in her studio, hesitant. She has recorded the night in brushstrokes of emotion and tension, yet the true essence of the evening eludes her fully. She understands with an artist's intuition that clarity emerges only slowly, like light filtering through storm clouds. She knows the Wilders are changed, not by confession alone, but by the acknowledgement of absence, by the reckoning of years unspoken. The house itself exhales. Walls that have heard arguments, footsteps, and silence for decades seem to sag under the weight of unburdened emotion. It is a living chronicle, this place, its floors, its windows, its chandeliers holding the history of love, failure, hope, and regret. And tonight, it bears witness to the transformation of those who inhabit it, though the journey is far from complete. Sebastian finally speaks, voice low and deliberate. I see it now. The years. The absence. Everything I thought I controlled, his voice falters, cracks like a pane of glass. I see what I've lost, and I see what I still can salvage. His admission does not erase the past, but it softens the edges, allows for the possibility of repair. Isabel, standing beside him, nods slightly, not with unguarded acceptance, but with measured recognition. It is not about control, Sebastian, she says softly. It is about presence. And presence is earned, not demanded. Her words, simple yet profound, settle over the room like a calm after storm. Yet beneath them lies a current of ongoing responsibility, of vigilance that cannot be abandoned. Caspian pauses, his defiance tempered by understanding. Then let us begin, he says. Not with anger, but with cautious hope, with recognition of the fractured past, and the work necessary to rebuild what was broken. His voice carries years of absence, grief, and longing, yet it is not weighted solely by despair. It holds potential, fragile yet undeniable, like a single candle flickering against a darkened hall. Violet Everly's presence lingers in the air, intangible yet undeniable. She has accomplished what she came to do: reveal, disrupt, catalyze, but she does not linger. She is both observer and instigator, a ghost whose impact persists long after she has vanished from sight. The family senses her absence as acutely as they sensed her presence, aware now of forces they cannot fully control, of truths they cannot fully contain. The night deepens, yet within the house a new rhythm emerges. Broken patterns begin to realign, cautious bridges are extended, silences are negotiated into dialogue, and the unspoken is finally acknowledged. The past remains, indelible and heavy, but the present is mutable, filled with possibility. Mr. Finch records quietly, his notes capturing not only what has occurred, but also the tension of potential, how the convergence of absence, confrontation, and revelation will shape the days to come. He knows that families are never static, that relationships are not linear, that love and failure are intertwined in patterns too complex to predict fully. Mrs. Crane dips her brush into pigment, capturing shadows and light, frustration and revelation, love and loss. Her canvas reflects what the house cannot say, what the family cannot yet articulate, a visual chronicle of human frailty and resilience, of chaos rendered into art, of the extraordinary unfolding within ordinary walls. And within the Wilders, a subtle transformation has begun. Sebastian is softened by acknowledgement. Isabel is fortified by understanding. Caspian is tempered by dialogue. The absence and tension of years are crystallized into clarity. Yet none of it is complete. The work remains, ongoing, tentative, beautiful in its imperfection. The house waits, but not passively. Every board, every window pane, every shadow now remembers. Every whispered truth, every acknowledgement, every cautious step toward reconciliation leaves its imprint. The convergence has occurred, but the aftermath is alive, and the family must navigate the fragile balance of history, presence, and possibility. And as dawn begins to filter through the curtains, faint but insistent, I see that they are not merely surviving, they are beginning to reconcile, to reckon, to live within the truth they have long avoided. The night has been a crucible, a testing ground for hearts and wills. And though the path ahead is uncertain, there is hope, a fragile, trembling, essential hope that they will endure. The house groans under the weight of its own history tonight. Every wall, every floorboard, every shuttered window seems to strain against what is about to be uncovered. The air is electric, heavy with anticipation, trembling with the unspoken truths that have been simmering in silence for decades. Shadows stretch unnaturally across the hallways, flickering as if anticipating confession, as if the house itself is urging them toward revelation. Sebastian stands rigid in the study, the air around him thick with suppressed tension. He feels it, every heartbeat of the house, every tremor of anticipation. 7 years of absence, 7 years of silence, cannot remain unaddressed. His gaze finds Caspian, narrowed with both recognition and accusation. And finally, for the first time, Sebastian's voice cracks the silence. "You left," he says, low, almost a whisper. But the words carry the weight of all those years unspoken. You left and we were unprepared, blind, unwilling to see what we were losing. Caspian stiffens, the memories of those 7 years rushing back, the nights of loneliness, the nights of silent fury, the whispered accusations in his own head of abandonment and misunderstanding. He steps closer, fists clenched, but not in anger. In hope, in demand for recognition. We weren't blind. You just refused to see me. You just refused to notice the spaces I tried to fill or escape. Isabel, standing between them, exhaled slowly, finally relinquishing her role as silent mediator. It was never about refusal, she says. It was about fear. Fear of failing you, of failing ourselves. And perhaps fear of facing what love can demand when absence grows too long. Her voice trembles slightly, fragile yet resolute, as if she is threading fragile bridges of understanding between father and son. The truth, however, demands more than words. Sebastian's hand shakes as he opens the old desk drawer. Hidden there, carefully folded, are letters. Letters that reveal the secrets he has carried silently for decades. Letters Isabel never knew existed, detailing a complicated past, missteps, regrets, moments of neglect, moments of protection misunderstood. Each letter is a shard of confession, a crystallized fragment of truth that had been buried beneath years of pride. Caspian's eyes widen as he takes them, hands trembling, lips pressed tight to hold back the torrent of emotion. You, all this time, his voice falters. All this time, you were… Yes, Sebastian admits, voice cracking. I was trying. I was failing. I was human. And in my imperfection, I hurt you without realizing. Violet Everly steps forward for the first time, her presence no longer just an influence but a catalyst. You all needed this, she says softly, almost unassumingly. The stories you hide, the absences you carry, the mistakes you deny, they are all part of the pattern. But patterns can break. Patterns can be rewritten. Her eyes, sharp and piercing, move across the room, capturing every falter, every hesitation, every small flicker of emotion. Mrs. Penelope Crane, from her corner with brushes abandoned, observes every detail. The tilt of Sebastian's shoulders, the tension in Caspian's jaw, the release in Isabel's stance, the subtle dominance of Violet's presence. Each gesture, each trembling breath, is recorded in her mind, each one a note in the symphony of revelation. She understands now, more clearly than ever, that the canvas of life is painted not only with colors we choose, but with the shadows we avoid. Mr. Finch writes furiously from his vantage point outside, capturing the chronicle of confessions, the eruption of truth, the fragile reconciliation that is unfolding. He knows this night will be remembered not for the anger or despair alone, but for the courage required to expose the fractures that have defined them, the courage to confront the imperfect past, and the present consequences of absence and secrecy. The conversation flows, jagged and raw. Confessions of mistakes made, moments overlooked, times when silence was weaponized instead of used for reflection. Words cut, but they also heal. Every hidden truth revealed is a step toward understanding, toward empathy, toward the tenuous rebuilding of trust. The air vibrates with the intensity of years compressed into hours, a storm of emotion finally spilling into light. Caspian reads the letters aloud, his voice shaking but determined, sharing the burdens he has carried alone for too long. Sebastian listens, first rigid, then slowly softening as recognition dawns. The recognition that failure is inevitable, but that acknowledgement can be transformative. Isabel nods, tears tracing quiet paths down her face, her heart opening to the possibility that the family, fractured yet resilient, can endure. Violet's presence remains magnetic, invisible yet undeniable. She does not intervene directly, yet every word spoken, every truth revealed, carries the weight of her influence. She embodies the intangible, revelation, disruption, clarity, without ever dominating the room. She is both observer and guide, shaping the path of reconciliation while remaining untouchable, inscrutable. The night stretches, heavy and sacred. Sebastian reaches for Caspian, an awkward gesture of reconciliation, a trembling hand seeking connection after years of separation. Caspian hesitates, then accepts, the gesture small but monumental, a bridge across the chasm of absence. Isabel's hands rest gently on both shoulders, a triangle of acknowledgement, forgiveness, and hope. And yet, the secrets do not end. Each revelation begets another. Each confession reveals layers previously concealed. The family, for the first time in years, stands together in shared vulnerability. The house breathes with them, a living witness, absorbing the echoes of long-held truths, the tremors of reconciliation, the fragile emergence of trust. Outside, Mr. Finch closes his notebook, aware that the most crucial events of this household have been chronicled, though the aftershocks will ripple far beyond tonight. Mrs. Crane returns to her canvases, capturing not only what she sees, but the emotional resonance that will linger long after the words fade. Violet finally slips into the shadows once more, leaving the family to navigate the aftermath of exposure, strengthened by clarity, burdened with awareness, yet poised on the threshold of a fragile, resilient new beginning. The Wilders, fractured and imperfect, are irrevocably changed. Secrets have been revealed, absences confronted, and bonds tested. The house holds the truth now, as tangible as the floorboards, the walls, the flickering light, and the whispered voices that will never be forgotten. Tonight is not an ending, but a crucible, a moment of confrontation and revelation that will shake the family for years to come. Morning breaks over the Wilder house, but the dawn is not soft. It carries with it the residue of the night, the echoes of words that have finally been spoken, of secrets that have been dragged from shadow into light. The air is thick with humidity, dust motes dancing in streaks of sunlight that fall unevenly through the curtains, illuminating the small imperfections in the walls, the furniture, the floors, all mirrors of the family within. Sebastian sits at the edge of the dining table, head lowered, coffee steaming in the mug he almost forgot to hold. There is a tentative stillness in him, a rare surrender to reflection. He thinks of the confrontation last night, of the letters, of the silence broken by the weight of truth. For the first time in years, he feels the fragility of life pressing upon him, not as control, not as authority, but as responsibility tempered by humility. Isabel moves around the room like a soft current, straightening a chair here, gathering a stray napkin there. She has the grace of someone who has survived storms, but now there is a subtle lightness in her movements. The confrontation did not erase fear, but it reshaped it. Fear is now tethered to understanding, a tool for care rather than control. Her eyes meet Caspian's across the table. A slow, tentative nod passes between them. Communication, once fractured, has begun its careful repair. Caspian's presence is both restless and tempered. The anger that once fueled rebellion is now tempered with insight, tempered by recognition of absence and the complex imperfection of those he calls parents. He reaches for the letters Sebastian left, tracing the words as if to reconcile the past with the present. Every sentence is both revelation and bridge. He speaks not to accuse, but to acknowledge. I see you, and I think, maybe we can try again. Violet Everly watches from the shadowed hallway, her presence barely perceptible, yet undeniable. She does not interfere, does not guide, yet her influence remains woven into every acknowledgement, every softening gesture, every tentative step toward reconciliation. She is the quiet fulcrum, the catalyst of clarity, and her absence in conversation emphasizes the truths now voiced without need of interruption. The family has begun to navigate the web she has teased open, yet her lingering presence ensures the tension between known and unknown remains palpable. Mrs. Penelope Crane returns to her easel, brush poised over canvas. The strokes she lays down are tentative at first, capturing the subtle shifts in light, the barely perceptible tremors of emotion, the weight of the unspoken. She paints the aftermath, the delicate balance between fragility and hope, the intersection of despair and endurance. She understands that resolution is not a conclusion. It is a continuous process of observation, reflection, and integration. Outside, Mr. Atticus Finch records the quiet morning, aware that the crescendo of confrontation has given way to a softer, more reflective rhythm. He notes the ways in which families rebuild, not linearly, not cleanly, but in spirals, sometimes backward, sometimes sideways, often unexpectedly. He watches the sun glint off the roof, the angles of shadows shifting with the rising light, knowing that clarity comes slowly, often in fragments, yet persists. Sebastian stands finally, stretching taut muscles and loosening shoulders that have carried decades of unacknowledged stress. He approaches Caspian with caution, humility softened by understanding, offering words carefully chosen but resonant. I cannot undo the past, but I can try to be present. Caspian nods, small but significant, a recognition of possibility, not certainty, a fragile trust extended across years of absence. Isabel joins them, her hand resting lightly on Sebastian's arm, another on Caspian's shoulder. The gesture is unspoken, yet communicates volumes, support, patience, acknowledgement, and readiness to begin anew. She is the axis once again, but now she is not merely sustaining order. She is witnessing transformation. The house absorbs this energy. The floors exhale, the walls settle. The windows catch the light, reflecting the subtle rebirth of connection. Violet lingers in the corner, observing the small, careful gestures that define the tentative reconciliation. She is content. Her role as catalyst, as instigator of revelation, is complete. And yet, in the space she occupies, the room feels unsettled, aware that resolution does not equal perfection, that life will continue with its fractures and its surprises. She fades slowly, leaving the Wilders to navigate the aftermath, empowered yet challenged, aware yet cautious. Mrs. Crane studies the room again, brush hovering. She captures not the confrontation but the soft aftermath, the glimmers of hope, the subtle alignment of attention, the quiet acknowledgement of mistakes, and the readiness to begin anew. Her painting is both a record and a mirror, a testament to the enduring beauty of imperfection, of families who survive confrontation and emerge altered but intact. The house holds them now in its quiet embrace. The chaos of last night has settled into a rhythm, fragile, tenuous yet persistent. There are still shadows, there are still absences, there are still mysteries, yet they coexist with moments of acknowledgement, moments of recognition, moments of tentative trust. Mr. Finch closes his notebook at last, satisfied that he has witnessed history in miniature, a family navigating the thin line between fracture and cohesion. He notes the lingering mysteries, the potential of future discord, the weight of unspoken emotions, the inevitability of new challenges, but also the undeniable human resilience that persists through acknowledgement and presence. And in the Wilder house, the light grows stronger. Sebastian, Isabel, and Caspian sit together for the first time in years without argument, without avoidance, without silence as weapon. They speak softly, carefully, their words measured but genuine, carrying the echoes of confrontation and the possibility of new beginnings. Violet Everly has vanished, her presence a memory, a subtle catalyst for growth. Mrs. Crane resumes her painting, capturing the shadows and light of a house, a family, a story that has been irreversibly altered. Mr. Finch departs his window across the street, leaving the neighborhood in quiet reflection, his chronicle complete for now. The house waits, but differently. It is still alive, still listening, still bearing witness. Yet now it carries a new rhythm, a rhythm of acknowledgement, tentative reconciliation, and the quiet promise of endurance. Shadows persist, mysteries linger, but the family has taken the first step toward presence, toward trust, toward an imperfect yet vital continuity. Morning has fully arrived. Sunlight streams across floors and furniture, catching dust motes that dance like memories in the air. And as the Wilders move through the house, They do so with awareness, humility, and a fragile hope that despite past fractures, they can navigate the complexity of love, absence, and imperfection together. The story does not end. It merely begins anew. Thanks for watching. Don't miss the next video.